o'clock on Monday, April 17th, and we will call this meeting of the Sault Ste. Marie City Commission to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Gary.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
Commissioner Bospis Rath.
Here.
Commissioner Habusta.
Here.
Commissioner Marble.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Here.
Everybody's present. Could we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everybody. Good to see a full gallery this evening. Moving on into item 4, which is mayor comments and general announcements. On behalf of the City Commission, of course, the City of Sault Ste. Marie, congratulations to the world champion USA Women's Hockey with Abby Rock centering the first line. Didn't realize, was that a woohoo in the back? And if you follow them, the first Women's Worlds was in 1990, and U.S. and Canada have been in the final game every year but one. And so it was pretty nice to see the U.S. Defeat them last night, although Canada's a good neighbor, but it was a fantastic game. Also, we'd like to extend our best wishes to the City of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which yesterday celebrated their 111th year as a city. This evening we have no proclamations or recognitions, so we'll move on into item C, which is public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments on regularly scheduled agenda items? Item E1, form-based code, is a public hearing, so you don't need to reserve time under that. You'll get 5 minutes, but anybody that would like to reserve any time for any of the other items? Seeing none, we'll move into item D, which is the consent agenda. Deputy City Manager Robin Troyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Under the consent agenda, 1, approval of the City Commission meeting minutes of April 3rd. Item 2, acceptance of Parks and Recreation Board meeting minutes of January 31st. Item 3, acceptance of the Planning Commission meeting minutes of April 6th. Item 4 is consideration of Deputy City Manager Troyer's authority to engage legal counsel on behalf of the city. Item 5 is consideration of Traffic Control Order 23-03 on Ashman Street. Item 6 is consideration to apply for a 2023 Port Infrastructure Development Program grant. Item 7 is consideration to apply for MDOT Category F grant for Riverside Drive. Item 8 is consideration to apply for an MDOT safety grant for West Easterday and Meridian. Item 9 is consideration of a contract agreement for Michigan Department of Transportation for Sanderson Field Airport runway painting and seal coating. Item 10 is consideration to apply for NDOT TEDFA grant for Phase 2 of Salmon Runway. Item 11 is scheduling of a public meeting on Drinking Water State Revolving Fund project planning documents for the water system upgrades at the regular City Commission meeting of May 15th. And item 12 is approval of the consent agenda items as presented.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. Would any commissioner like any of the items removed for individual consideration or further explained? Seeing none, Commissioner Bauer.
So moved, we pass tonight's consent agenda.
Support.
Has been moved and supported that we pass consent agenda tonight. Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Moving now into E, special orders of business. Number 1, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up first for commission consideration is acceptance of the proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget beginning July 1st, 2023. This is the statutory date that we have to have the budget to the commission. Tonight we're just looking for acceptance, or not acceptance, receiving the budget as we'll go over the budget in depth tomorrow night, starting at 4:15.
Thank you, City Manager. So again, we have a public meeting tomorrow, 4:15 in these chambers, and on Wednesday at 4:15, if necessary, to go through the detail of the budget. Any questions or comments? Can we get a motion to accept the City Manager's recommended budget for fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023? Commissioner Bossas-Strath.
Motion to accept the city manager's recommendation budget for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023.
Support.
Been moved and supported that we accept the budget. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Budget is received. Moving on into E, special orders of business. Number 2, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a public hearing portion and a potential vote on the form-based code. Since the last commission meeting, nothing has changed within the proposed ordinance. Just a couple of highlights to make regarding the item. The Plan Commission did finally have a meeting on April 6th. There was one member not present, so there was 7 members in attendance. The item was taken back up with the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission voted to recommend adoption on a 5-2 basis. Another point, just to bring up, the commission is aware, we did receive a petition that came in last Friday, as well as an addendum to it today, with signatures requesting that the final vote be a 2/3 vote instead of a simple majority vote. Those signatures are going to be evaluated by a third party to ensure that the signatures and the area provided are acceptable. So tonight, we would look to hold the public hearing and then table the vote to a future meeting.
Thank you, City Manager. So we will open up the public hearing on the adoption of form-based code. And I know there are probably some people that would like to make some comments. If you please come to the podium and state your name and residence for the record, please. And we have a 5-minute timer for each, because we'll have
Yeah,
quite
I
a
don't
few.
think I'm gonna,
Thank you.
I don't think I'm gonna take 5, so I hope not. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. As you mentioned, on Friday, April 14th and Monday, the 17th, the protest petitions and affidavits were filed with the city clerk. This is pursuant to MCL 125-3403 and City Charter Section 10.1.1205.
Hey, Matt, could we have you back up just a second and give your name and
I
residence?
apologize.
Thank
Matt
you.
Wilkes.
Thank you.
Sorry. Do you
Yep.
need, okay. This law requires a 2/3 vote of the city commission rather than a simple majority of 20% of the private property owners of the land by area object to the proposed zoning change. Publicly owned land is excluded, including public land on long-term leases to private entities. As of now, we have nearly 40% of the owners by land area of contributing structures and 24% of owners by land area of all parcels affected by the proposed zoning change. Over 90% of the owners we asked to sign said yes, indicating there are likely more who would sign if time allowed. The petition is not subject to initiatory and referendum petition requirements as identified in the city charter. For those, either generate an action directly from voters or request a change from voters after an action by the commission. Neither is the case here, as MCL 125-3403 is only applicable prior to final legislative action. And there is no legal recourse for owners after adoption of a zoning change other than change the commissioners and repeal. This is a unique petition specific to zoning changes. Regulations enacted by the city must meet an important legal principle placed on the enacting authority called substantive due process. This requires the authority to show the minimum required regulations were adopted to achieve the stated goals. And a general statement isn't enough from the authority. One would hope the city does not furthermore, other public entities, such as county, state, and federal, are not exempt from these regulations. One would hope the city does not exempt, or grant a lot of variances on these entities while enforcing it on private property owners. MSU Extension Series titled Restrictions on Zoning Authority dated March 9th, 2021 is a great reference summarizing government requirements to adopt zoning ordinances. The commission is required to understand if the form-based codes in its entirety, including all the architectural requirements, can legally be adopted. So I hope you have all received opinions directly from your attorney or a legal opinion from the consultant which was hired regarding this and had robust discussions as allowed by section 4.9 of the city charter. And most importantly, that the commission believes that it can stand up to substantive due process claims. In the current state, these form-based codes generate great uncertainty for the owners of buildings. Numerous questions have been raised by the owners with little resolution, as these owners want to know the specifics unique to them and how this will affect them if they want to change their storefront. Zoning laws and architectural codes are arguably the most powerful tool government has over citizens because the effects are long-lasting and durable, especially in this instance as these codes are intended to last decades in their basic form. In closing, these codes boil down to a significant infringement upon private property rights and cost impact in exchange for statements of improved property values by regulating the look and appearance of the buildings. This is the textbook definition of an HOA, and the city will invariably appoint a committee to oversee the changes that are proposed by the owner beyond health and safety construction codes. The many owners who signed this petition do not support the form-based codes in its current form. We believe the most impacted by these codes should have the largest say. The following owners read by address are requesting 2/3 majority for the commission to pass the resolution. I'm going to start you at Ashman and Portage, going from north to south: 210, 212, 214, 216, 218, 220, 224, 226, 313, 321, 327, 405, 406, 544, 548, 551, 564, 711, 713, 720, 722, 724, 800, 807, 809, 810, 816, 819, 827, 914, and 1000 Ashman. In addition, 642 to 680 Court Street has signed, and those are 9 parcels, and 620 Court Street. Going back to Portage and Ashman and heading west on Portage, 105, 107, 111, 112, 117, 123, 125, 203, 205, 215, 221, 227, 201 Osborne, 305, 315, 329, 347, 407, 110, and 112 Ridge. Lastly, and I apologize for going over time, 120 Water, 124 Water, 106 Bingham, 110 Bingham, 205 Bingham, 149 East Portage, 128, 128, 129.5, 129, 125, and 123 East Portage, 113 Maple, 123 Maple, 301 Maple, 322 Court, and 529 Court. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else that would like to make comments in regard to form-based code? If you could please state your name and for the record.
Whoops, sorry, gotta find it now. Okay. Hi, Dana Sanderson. I have spoken before. I am not going to go back over a lot of the things that I've said before. I don't believe I need to rehash any of that. I am in favor of form-based code. There are a few things, though, that I think that I want to take a minute to a few additional points that I wanted to make tonight that I didn't have an opportunity, or that occurred to me after the last time that I spoke. One of them, at the last meeting, Commissioner Bauer had stated, and this is not verbatim, basically when you get a new code, you're stuck with it for the next 50 years, and that's just what you have. And I did want to point out that that's really not true. All code is somewhat fluid. It's not, you're not locked in completely, and things do change over time. Code can change over time. Not saying that what we're proposing, the current form-based code, has to change, but just that I don't think anyone should feel like whatever, if it is approved, that's it. And it's a draconian punishment to all of us that we can never have any kind of a discussion or change, and certainly there are also, there's the opportunity to request a variance with form-based code. I attended the Planning Commission meeting, spoke at that meeting. Only 2 of the commissioners at that meeting were in opposition, and one of them was Mr. McCready, who stated that he was opposed to form-based code because it puts government more in control over private property owners. Well, I'm here to tell you, having renovated 5 buildings in the last few years, that I am figuratively, not literally, in bed with the city government, because everything that I do is regulated by city government. There are ordinances, there are codes. This has nothing to do with form-based code. This has to do with life in an organized society. We all are tied very tightly to government entities for a number of reasons, and I'm going to give you 2 very quick examples. I'm currently in the process of renovating a 1906 church. I wanted to do a particular thing. This is private property. I own this church. Inside this church, there was something I wanted to do, and I am not allowed to. The building inspector came in and said, no, you can't do that. And, well, it's my building. Doesn't matter. I have to comply with the existing code, and I know that. Sign ordinances. There's no safety issues with sign ordinances, but we wanted to put up a sign at a previous business that we owned. We had a specific sign in mind. No, you cannot. Well, we own this property. We own this building. We own the parking lot. No, you cannot put up that sign. This is a city ordinance. So do I like these things? No, but this is life. In an organized society, we have rules that we have to follow, and we do have to work with government, and anyone who tells you that government is not in your private business is not understanding how things work, because they are every day. Every day, there is something that we have to do or comply with that has to do with government regulation. And then finally, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I am highly opposed to public controversy, and I have spent my entire adult life basically just quietly trying to do what I think is right, and that's it, and not stepping on toes and just doing my thing, okay? Tonight I'm making an exception because I feel so strongly about this situation. I feel like there's been so much misinformation, and I hear it every day from people who call me and who say, oh my gosh, we're gonna have HOA fees. No, you're not going to have HOA fees, but it's misunderstanding and misrepresentation. So tonight, I'm especially asking each of the commissioners, but those particularly who initially opposed form-based code, I want you to please keep an open mind about this. And I want to ask you to think very hard about who is opposing form-based code the most strongly and why. Who and why is launching this fight against form-based code. It seems to be one group in particular, and tonight I have right here 662 pages of building code violations and citations that belong to that group, okay? This is not 1 or 2 years worth of information, and this was all obtained completely legally. This is not 1 or 2 years, okay? This represents many years of systemic neglect of multiple buildings. So this stack of paper in my hands does not, in my opinion, represent someone or a group who understands the value of our historic buildings. It doesn't speak to respect. It doesn't speak to anyone who has a desire to make our community better or our downtown stronger. I think this speaks for itself, and that's what I wanted to bring tonight to show you. So please, think about who and why. Think about the motivation of why this is being opposed so vehemently. I don't think personally that personal motivation, personal gain is enough of a reason to deprive our entire community of something that would be beneficial to our community. And I can make this available if anyone would like to take a look at it.
Thank you very much, Dana. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to make any comments at this time? Like to come forward and state your name for the record?
My name is Steve Twardy, and generally speaking, my wife and I are for form-based code. And I'm not gonna, it's a very, very complicated issue, and it impacts many different departments within the city, and so I'm not gonna stand up here and talk about all that stuff, but the one thing that I have been thinking about that I wanted to share with you all is over the last 5 years, I've witnessed a lot of people in this community developing a vision for this town. That vision seems to stem always around the history of the community. And so, without putting names on all these people, I'm talking about city staff, I'm talking about the planning commission, I'm talking about the DDA, all of the people that have been involved with Michigan Main Street, and all the subcommittees that are a part of all those groups that help kind of put this vision of what we want the city to look like. And I think a yes vote on this particular matter says to all those people, thank you. We appreciate your time, we hear you, and we're gonna validate all of the work that you've done by putting something in place that will actually allow for it to happen. I think a no vote, obviously it's not gonna do that same thing, but if the commission does decide to vote no, I would ask that along with that decision, you provide some guidance on what all of those people should start working on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to make any comments at this time? Gonna have to tell us your name because we're not sure who you are.
And Linda Holt, the Executive Director of the Sioux Convention and Visitors Bureau. You've all received a letter from the Board of Directors of the Sioux Convention and Visitors Bureau in support of this. I want to tell you a little story, and I'm only going to take a minute. I have had over the last, since 2007, Pure Michigan here with us all the time. I've had Dave Lorenz up here, the head of Pure Michigan, walking down Ashman Street before we started with the Main Street renovations, and he kept saying, you've got such beautiful buildings here, they need to be renovated, you need to be doing these things, you need to be going through and getting them done, get your history back. And during the 2018, we had a lot of empty buildings downtown, and if you recall, we went forward and had a whole bunch of big pictures made to go in the windows that were empty, so that we could show people our history in 2008, so we could see what was happening. It's extremely important. I've been here 21 years now, and watching Sault Ste. Marie grow and grow forward and being so positive, people wanting to go downtown, more people wanting to go downtown, more people wanting to do things. And we have supported a lot of the downtown events, a lot of the things that are happening downtown, because we see that vision. We see that bigger vision. We see what people can do when you come together and work together. So I just want to say, you know, it's not just about, it's about everybody, not just a few. It's about everybody. It's about this community. As I said to the Planning Commission, we have all worked very hard to make Sault Ste. Marie better. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak at this time? Floor is open. Anybody else?
Hello.
Hello. State your
I'm-
name for the record, please.
I'm Sue Ann Wilkes. It's hard for me to stick to my comments today after such a personal attack. I circulated to the council the document with 45 properties or so that have been restored, renovated, refreshed, and/or reoccupied. We are here today because the city in 2017 hired a consultant. That money was paid, and he was here to institute a code change. Given that document that I shared with the 45 properties, do the same conditions exist today that existed in 2017? Can we not celebrate the victory of the vast improvements documented there instead of insisting that progress has not happened? Or do we have to continue to discount vast personal investments by insisting we can do better. Of course we can, and we will. We're going to continue. Building owners didn't have to be guided by a government code or their neighbors to improve their buildings. They did it because it was wise and beneficial for their families and their finances. I trust the decisions of my neighbors, and I would never presume to dictate to them decisions around private investment. Regarding our business owners, I'm here with my husband tonight representing the owners of 70 properties, the likes of Michael Lynn, the Chrysellises, the Lambroses. The list goes on. This was not tough to get these signatures. Matt and I, as he said, we ran out of time, not support. Why, I wondered. I believe these many business owners oppose this code because they have some of the most experience with city government, restrictions, dictates, and codes. I'm afraid municipalities, even ours, has not been good stewards of the power that's been granted to them to rule over their constituents. Owners said they were hesitant to make opinions known due to fear of retribution. And I know these fears not to be unfounded. It warmed my heart when they signed anyways, owners of 70 properties. Signed anyways, because they thought it was important to stand with their neighbors and support them, not judge them. Some had done extensive historic renovations. Some had done remodels. Some had not. Some are still planning and saving their own money to do it. You'll hear of successful cities that have form-based codes. Less than 6% of the cities in the state of Michigan have a form-based code. Many of them have had it for less than 10 years. Several statistics separate us from these cities. Most of these populations are far more affluent than ours. Some of these cities we use to fill gaps in services that we have, such as dentists, doctors, and very few goods, but some goods. It's not form-based code that made these towns shopping destinations. They've been for decades. I remember going to the Circus Shop in downtown Petoskey to buy clothes when they had their big sale in the 1970s. At that town, our town was still pursuing urban renewal, i.e. tearing down our historic buildings to redevelop new. Now this same body, but different commissioners, would like the opposite. They want the business owners to bear the cost of undoing the agendas our cities have pursued in the past. Some business owners may want to believe their fellow business owners to be the source of their struggle. Property values are raised by potential income of a business property far more than its aesthetics. If my sister had invested $700,000 in the little gift shop, as one grant had suggested, would she sell more merchandise? Maybe some, but not enough. She would be in a hole. This may be the case with other folks who have overinvested in town. I stand with them to help them where I can, but that support will not include dictating to others that same path. And what is the city's interest? We talked today in one of the most opulent public buildings in town. Millions have been invested in this building. Millions more of our tax dollars have been funneled into a little-used parking structure that has done little. The truth is, for 20 years, we have starved our downtown of development by using our tax dollars earmarked for that very thing on something else, to invest in tax-exempt properties that do nothing to help our success. When I hear citizens say 20 years we're behind other cities by 20 years, I believe that corresponds with some pretty significant and unwise decisions. But hindsight is 20/20. So we need to move forward and find solutions that support, not burden, the businesses that survived that drought of investment. Again, I ask the City Commission to make motions to do things it can control to improve the downtown. Direct our city manager to prioritize streets, curbs, and dangerously uneven sidewalks. Even small things can make a big impact. We repeatedly hear how complex it is to get a license to kill weeds. The weeds downtown are really unsightly. It seems from the state website, it only takes a $50 fee and 2 past exams for our city employees to get credentials to kill weeds. That doesn't seem very complicated. In closing, I want to remind you that privately owned small business and property owners, all 70 pieces of property, are the heart of our historic downtown. And they are our only downtown. They have spoken. Please don't disregard those property owners. Please don't use a split decision or the weight of uninvested parties to betray the folks who have served this town, its causes, and its people for generations. Let them continue to do their work and join the next generation on a path forward of their own making. They carry all the risk and the burden, and they should chart the course. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else in the audience that would like to make any comments at this time? Stephanie, your son wants to make comments. Anybody else? We have one taker.
One taker, one last taker. Hi, I'm Shelley Morley. I did speak at the commission meeting, and I am for form-based code. I know there's a lot of opposition back and forth. I did speak to a couple of property owners today that, didn't read the form-based code, didn't understand the form-based code, or, possibly thinking that form-based code was going to cost them a lot of extra money in fees, or I just felt that they didn't quite understand what they were being told. And then I was like, well, maybe I'm misinterpreting the form-based code, which I don't think I am. But I'm hoping that if this vote is, if we wait on this vote, that some people that have voted no for form-based code could possibly actually read it and understand it instead of, signing away their downtown rights. And the reason why I'm for it, and I know there's a lot of back and forth on it, is that when left, I believe, for your own interpretation of historic buildings, that there has to be something that guides the business owners in order to make those buildings look good. I'm sure if given like 3 people in the room on the same building, we'd all come up with something different. And if there was something like that would guide us and say, well, this is what the building looked like. This is what the building should look like. And I think that would be so much better than just leaving it up for each individual's interpretation. So, again, I am for a form-based code. I hope we have time to educate some of the people downtown that aren't educated about it. And that's it.
Thank you, Shelley. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, we'll close the hearing and move to the commission. I think city manager had mentioned that we are in receipt of a protest petition, and because of that, we are going to have to postpone the vote so that we can have a legal review to make sure that the affidavit contains all the information that's necessary, and so that we can make sure that we're covering our bases as well. But let's have a discussion on form-based code. Commissioners, any questions or discussion points? Commissioner Bassos-Rath. Sure.
All right, I'll be first. I've said this from the beginning, I'm for form-based code, for many of the reasons why our constituents have said. Shelley, you kind of hit the hammer on the head right there when you said a guide, and I think that would be the best way to describe it. That's what I've tried to tell people if they've asked me. It's kind of like a guide. We've always talked about having historical downtown. That's what we live by, other than the locks and the freighters and all that. But part of our history is our historic buildings, what we're standing in now, the Polar. And so, I understand, I hear you on the nose, I hear the concern, but I'm still for it, so I have to think of the whole city and our constituents, so that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Commissioner. Anybody else have any comments? Commissioner Miller?
I read it about 3 times. It's a nice thing to read just before bedtime, put your head to sleep. And I understand it. Sorry, Shelley, I understand it. I've been educated on it, whatever. But to me, it's just, I'm not for it. To me, it's just more government telling people what to do with their money and how they can treat their property, and I don't think it's right. I really don't. I've been a no vote on it since we started with the consulting firm in 2017, I think it was. So I just want to say I'm a no vote on it. No matter what happens tonight with petitions or whatever, I'm just no right through.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Anybody else have any comments or questions? I think everybody knows that. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Rubenstein.
No, I was just going to say, especially over the last 72 hours, I've received a lot of questions, and I would agree with some of those comments that those who right now are opposed to it and for it, I think the vote being delayed will give a lot more time to truly understand it. And if you are opposed, I would say really ask yourself, what are you opposing? As you look through it, there is a lot of resources, whether it's asking us questions or the city questions, to really get answers and truthfully understand why you feel, whether you're for it or against it, and really, really take the time to educate yourself, because I feel like I've going cross-eyed the amount of times I've gone back and looked at it or got clarification, and it has helped me form my opinion on it.
Thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate you saying those comments too. I was going to go down the same road. I think that when I looked at a lot of the properties that you named off that signed the petition, I think a lot of those people were not involved in the process, didn't hear the form-based code discussion, and maybe don't understand what form-based code really is and what it is not. I think Kelly Freeman has done an outstanding job at the last couple of meetings of explaining what form-based code is, the flexibilities, and how it will make Sault Ste. Marie a better place, more consistent, and will help us restore our historic look. Does not put an extra burden on the property owner. I know that that is everybody's thought, but we've gone through it, we've talked to people, it does not. I am for it, obviously. I think we need to have some consistency in this city, and I see others in the community that are involved with historic ventures, and we need to preserve the history of Sault Ste. Marie. We are the first city in Michigan, and we need to make sure that we do preserve some of the character that we still have. Agree with you 100%. Urban renewal was dumb. Tore down a lot of buildings in this community and other communities. Probably didn't have to. This won't protect that from those initiatives, but it certainly will help with the character of some of the downtown buildings. The other things to understand is that there are flexibilities that do come with form-based code. We have some developers that are looking here to build a very nice Marriott property that can't do it without the flexibilities that form-based code brings. So there are positives that do come forward with changes. Sault Ste. Marie, born and raised, dad born and raised, grandpa born and raised. I love Sault Ste. Marie. I would not in any way, shape, or form want to penalize any business owner. My parents were business owners, my grandparents were business owners, I owned a business for a short time. I am very pro-business. But I think this is the time to make the positive changes in the culture of the city of Sault Ste. Marie. We can't be at the bottom forever. We have to move forward and move up. And that means we have to have some standards for some of the buildings in our community. I think I really appreciate the Wilks because they were at all of the informational sessions. They gave a lot of constructive input, and I can tell you this final project has a lot of their changes in it and has a lot of the considerations in there. And I know at the last meeting, the City Commission decided against the Planning Commission's original intent to put the trigger back in so that it would not have an impact on business owners if they were going to renovate their buildings. Form-based code is in a lot more communities than you think, and this has come about because of some of our involvement in different communities. I see Commissioner Twardy, we were in Traverse City, and we talked extensively about form-based code and why they can put the buildings that they do on the sidewalk, why they have the culture that they have downtown, why they have the parking available downtown. It doesn't require to have a Walmart parking lot in front of a little strip mall. It has different requirements. It's actually fewer requirements. But it's what some of the forward-looking communities do. And this changes. And I don't remember who mentioned it, but maybe Dana, but if this code were in effect, or if it doesn't go into effect, you can still petition to have changes made. It's not the concrete tablets. It can be changed. And you can file for zoning board changes, appeals, whatever you have to do. And those are looked at by citizens of the city of Sault Ste. Marie that make those decisions. So I favor form-based code. I really do hope that those that are opposed to it, or if those that sign the petition, please seek more information. Talk to Kelly Freeman, talk to the city manager. Give your examples, they will give examples. Look at the pictures of all of the projects. I mean, Sue Ann, you gave us some great projects, but those did follow SHPO. They followed some historic requirements because a lot of those were grant projects. And those will happen going forward. So please reach out, seek information, talk to the commissioners, talk to the city before we have that final vote. We want your information, or your opinion, we want information, but please don't make your decision based on poor information that has come to you. Make your decision to oppose it on information that comes from fact from the city. So I don't know if any other commissioners have any comments, any questions? I'm sorry, Commissioner Bauer.
Too subtle.
I should have set the timer for 5 minutes, I guess.
This is, and I've been on the commission, not continuously, but, been at least an interested party and been on this board for 18 years. And this is probably the most controversial subject that we have come across in a good long while, as far as both sides feeling very strongly, very passionately. But the one thing that I want everyone to remember is that whether you're for it or whether you're against it, we're all on the same team and we want the same things. The vote and the issue is really about how we go about it, because you've got evidently a lot of property owners in the downtown who have signed this petition, and I kind of resent a little bit the implication that those people don't understand it or don't know what they're talking about. Because I don't think that's true. I think what you have is a group of people who own property who feel, as I do, that that philosophically speaking, more regulation would do more to inhibit development than it would to promote development. And that's really what's at the core of the issue for people who are against form-based code. I'm not against development by any stretch. I mean, I've spent more money in developing my property than I will ever see. Likely, and I hate to be morbid, but likely I will be dead before my loans are paid off. That is why I'm insured out the yin-yang, to make sure that the bank and everybody gets paid off when I die. That is the type of investment that I have. And I'm not alone, And the people who own the property feel that they would like, instead of having more restrictions on what they do and the way that they develop things. I mean, I can only really speak with authority about my property, right? And it was not faced with form-based code. Do people like it? I don't know. Is it, does it even comply with all the aspects of form-based code? I really couldn't tell you, truthfully, whether I complied 100% with form-based code. Do I care? Not even slightly. I like it, and that's my building. I own that building. I pay the mortgage every month, and I think that as a businessman, I am, and if you believe in capitalism, then you've got to believe that the people who own the buildings are going to develop them in such a way that are, going to be the most lucrative and profitable and best for them. And so, I hope that however this plays out, that we can get beyond it and, people won't be pointing fingers and saying, well, that person doesn't, love Sault Ste. Marie because they don't want to see, because they don't want to see this type of development or that type of development. Or, this person is not pro-business because, because they want to put more restrictions on the way the development occurs, et cetera, But I'm hoping, and that's really my hope, that regardless of how this shakes out, that, we can get beyond it in the future and we can continue to work together.
Thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else? Sure, Commissioner Rubenstein.
Just a quick response to that, and I appreciate everything that Commissioner Bauer had to say, but as a building owner downtown myself as well, in looking through it and getting my questions answered, and I just don't feel it is ultra restrictive. And if you read through it, look at parking for, I think it's retail and in restaurants. It actually eases restrictions. So I wouldn't necessarily look at it as it's more restrictions than are already in place. And any question I've gone to Kelly with, or Kelly Freeman with, of could I do X, Y, and Z? Most of the time it's been yes within this construct, but those constructs are already there, regardless of if this passes or not.
Thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's comments and consideration. So we'll move on into item E, which is special orders of business. Item number 3, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a public hearing regarding the Clean Water State Revolving Fund project and a subsequent motion to approve the wastewater treatment plant upgrades project pending funding. So we have a PowerPoint to go over with the commission. It's not as long as the last one was. Tonight we have City Engineer Dave Boyle and our consultant with Donahue that will kind of go over the presentation. I will throw it up on the screen.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. To the mayor and to the commissioners. We've had, just to start off by saying, we've really appreciated the opportunity to be of service to the city over the last 9 months, working with you from an initial assessment of the treatment plant to you now making an application for a state revolving loan fund, which is a loan for improvements to both your collection system and the wastewater treatment plant. So this was public noticed over 15 days ago now. The requirement was a 15-day public notice of the public hearing. The document has been available for all of that time. So behind all of this is there is a what's referred to as a project planning document, that essentially outlines all of the different improvements being considered. It just goes through an evaluation of alternatives. And so what I'm going to go through this evening is kind of a summation of that in this presentation. So just to understand that in this public hearing tonight is the conclusion of that public notice period. So just in sort of just a background of what is the program, it's a low-interest loan financing program that is administered through the state, through the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, which is commonly referred to as EGLE, and it provides low-interest loans. And I provided here the information on last year's loans. So this is 2023. They were at loans at a 1.875% interest for a 20-year loan period. What's important to realize about that, though, is that that is just informational. I mean, it's going to be something like that, again, for 2024. And you'll see as we go through this that there is a part of this application targets projects within the fiscal year 24 loan period. And so that's why it's relevant. So you have a number of projects that have been proposed to be financed in this upcoming fiscal year. But what exactly those terms are will depend on this next year's program. The other thing to consider is that there is opportunities for principal forgiveness. This is up to the state again as to how they do this, but the way it's typically being done is that the state establishes communities that are overburdened, meaning that they have a financial need, and there's a number of ways in which that's determined. And then, so last year, as an example, the overburdened communities were given on the order of a 50% loan forgiveness. Some communities are classified as being significantly overburdened, and they were given even larger principal forgiveness. So Sault Ste. Marie qualifies as being an overburdened community. And so, again, not to say that you will receive 50% loan, if you are offered a loan, that it will be a 50% forgiveness. But just to put it in perspective as to kind of where that stands. And I think one of the reasons why, if you go back to the beginning of this whole discussion of why you want to make this application in this current year, is because of the amount of federal money that's flowing into the program that's providing with the capability to provide this loan forgiveness. So we move to the next slide. Just overall goals of the program. Looking at existing infrastructure, aging infrastructure, and improvements to it. And as I think many of you appreciate, the treatment plant and a lot of your collection system is aging. It's been in service and has been well maintained by the city for many, many years, but it is in need of some upgrades. Associated with that is needing to be able to maintain the compliance of the treatment plant with meeting its discharge permit, meeting the regulatory requirements, and then any future current and future capacity issues. And then I think you're all also very well aware of some of the issues within your collection system and the opportunity to provide improvements to that to reduce some of the flows coming into the collection system. So the way the report is done is it's broken into two areas. It looks at the collection system, and so EGLE encouraged the city to look at including some of the collection system improvements. They felt that would make their application more viable. So we worked through with the city staff. The city staff has already done a lot of the work on the collection system. This summarizes the projects that were identified from past work. And you'll see as we go through this that they were then prioritized within a schedule and programming of those improvements. And I'm not going to read them all to you. I mean, the report goes through them every one in detail. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have tonight, though. So if you move to the next slide, this sort of lays this out in terms of a schedule. So the projects were grouped into three priority projects, so 1, 2, and 3. The project Peckham Meridian, which is to eliminate 2 CSOs, was identified as being the higher priority. And this shows you within that 5-year planning period then how those would be addressed. So if we take that and then summarize it all into an overall financial plan for the collection system. So bear in mind these are conservative estimates. They're for planning purposes. They include a number of different contingencies and the loan administration costs. And they are just that. They're intended for the purposes of this document and how the application is made. So this lays it down then into the 2024 and then future projects. So what's important about that, I think, is, and I think there's been a lot of discussion about this already, is, this process where you're actually identifying projects in FY24 prior to actually completing the plan. So you've got $5 million worth of projects in the first year of improvements, and then subsequent years, another $4 million for the collection system. So then on the treatment plant, which is where we did our assessment and worked with you starting last June, we worked through this and worked with the plant staff, identified different areas of need. This summarizes all those different areas or these different unit processes within the treatment plant. And then we prioritize those, going through the similar kind of process as we did with the collection system. Main issues were the preliminary treatment, secondary treatment, electrical improvements and control system improvements, and then some other improvements then related to the biosolids handling and disposal. So these were broken down into the FY24 projects, and what was identified for that, the highest priority projects were the preliminary treatment, meaning the screening and grit removal, so that occurs at it's one of the first processes within the treatment plant. So you're taking out essentially the larger material at that point. The secondary treatment plant and the rehabilitation of that, and those are those big disc filters, if you've seen them, that rotate and have a biological growth on them. Many of those are in need of rehabilitation to be able to make them operational and keep them operational. The disinfection, which is at the last treatment process on the liquid side of the treatment plant, where the wastewater is actually disinfected before it goes out into the river. And as I mentioned earlier, some control systems and electrical upgrades, and those sort of support the other projects. And then future considerations or future projects were biosolids and the digester facility. So then when we looked at those financially, this breaks these down into the FY24 projects, which totaled $29.5 million worth of improvements. And then the future years being another almost $24 million worth of improvements. And again, these are conservative estimates, and they're for planning purposes at this point. So this is how the SRF process works, is laying these out this way and showing this planning process. So this is just sort of finalizing then, showing the schedule, how this lines up with those same priority 1, 2, and 3 projects. And so that's how they're grouped within the planning document. The final thing in terms of overall information is looking at how those are then broken down into a user cost impact. So the program, and I keep referring to the program, but it has a very structured approach to how the planning document is put together with different requirements in terms of information. So one of the requirements is that there be an evaluation of the user cost impacts. So what this does essentially is it takes the total cost of the improvements, and so you can see the total cost in FY24 is $35 million. And then in subsequent years is $28.5 million. And so what it then does is takes a number of customers and breaks it down into a yearly and a monthly cost. Now, what I want to say about that specifically is that relates to these particular costs. It does not necessarily relate to impact to the customer in terms of the actual cost being borne or being paid for. Because I think in talking with the city staff, the intention would be to utilize other debt retirement as a way of balancing this. You'd be taking on a new loan and essentially taking on a new loan in replacement of existing loans that have been retired. So I just want to make sure just to highlight that particular requirement. The other thing to say here is that when you look at the estimated forgiveness, you can see the numbers we utilized. And again, those were based off of experience, with the program and what was anticipated in terms of how much would be forgiven, based off of what we've seen in previous years. Final comment on this is that ultimately, this is an application to get a loan. If you receive the loan, and depending on what the terms of that loan are and what level of forgiveness you receive, you then get the choice of either accepting the loan or moving forward with it, or you can reprogram the program. You don't have to go ahead with all of these components within the planning document either. So I guess, comes back to the commission for overall review and approval eventually before you actually take on any of these projects. Just in conclusion, the overall objectives are to upgrade and modernize the treatment plant, reduce risk of any discharge permit violations, better position for future growth and any regulatory change, and to continue to protect the environment. All very important things. So with that, I guess I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from the commissioners? Must have covered it well. Anything from the city engineer? All right, and again, we will open up public hearing on the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Project Plan for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments at this time? This is a public hearing for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Project Plan. All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing and move to the commission. Any questions or comments from the commission? Sure, Commissioner Mailer.
Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Bosses-Rath.
Just curious, those estimates on cost, would you say that those are on the high end, high?
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, that's why I wanted to stress.
sure.
They are for planning purposes. And so obviously when you're going through that, you want to stay on the high side.
Sure.
And that's always our approach when we go into this. For one thing is, as details become better determined as you actually get into developing a project, the opportunity comes to try to, that you're going to get a more reasonable evaluation of what those actual costs are. But the last thing we want to do is to go into a loan application without being conservative.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Again, we appreciate you coming up here and appreciate the information. And as I understand it, I think you made it pretty clear that this is approval of part of the process that is required by the State Revolving Fund to look at the project plan, and certainly any project size, any project scope, any project costs, any rates, fees will be something that we discuss and vote on at a future date. So, seeing no other questions, Commissioner Habusta, would you like to make the motion? Thank you.
Motion to approve the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Plan for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades pending funding.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any questions, comments? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Under item F, communications, I see nothing there, so we'll move on into item G, which is business items. Number 1, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is 2 motions to reaffirm city commission action taken related to enterprise fleet management leases for Ford Police Interceptors, as well as a motion to direct city administration to draft amendments. So this particular item is coming to the commission based on a legal review that was requested by city staff. At the time, we brought a master lease and some lease agreements to the commission. Subsequently, there were some questions about some purchasing policies and some ordinances that may come into play with this. The legal review was commenced a couple weeks ago. That is included in the agenda item here. So the first motion is to reaffirm the city commission's action taken from December 19th. And then number 2 is a motion to direct city administration to draft amendments to applicable city charter ordinances and purchasing policy to address personal property leases and clarify the process. And Commissioner Miller had a question about what that meant earlier. The legal process or the legal review of the purchasing documents, some of the ordinances that oversee purchasing, determined that it wasn't quite applicable, so there would be a motion to amend those policies and then bring them to commission for adoption.
Thank you, City Manager. Are there any questions or comments from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Barr.
Yeah, I have a question. As this comes to just under $60,000 per vehicle, just to lease for 4 years, I was wondering how much these particular vehicles cost to buy, you know, and what the price comparison was.
There wasn't a price comparison for buying them at this time when we brought these original leases to you. The Ford had canceled all of their orders across the nation. This was one of the few options that we can get with Ford for their utility vehicles for the police department. At the time, I thought this was the best interest of the city to lease these so we can replace some of our more outdated, aged vehicles. One of the cars that we had last summer was sitting on the racks for about 6 months with a broken transmission. So at the time when we brought this forward, it was coming on the tail end of COVID. Nobody could really get any vehicles, and I felt this was the best way to move forward in getting vehicles.
Answer your question, Commissioner?
That sounds like a long way to say I don't know.
The last patrol vehicle that we purchased was 2021 Ford Interceptor, and it was $44,006.
Okay. And there are none
Fully
available,
equipped.
there are still none available to purchase now?
At the time when we brought this there was none.
Are there now?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I mean, this is kind of coming after the fact. When we first brought this to you, this was from that period in time back in December, and I couldn't tell you if they're available or not.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner.
I'll accept that.
All right. I have a couple comments. So back when we approved this master lease in February 2022, a lot of you weren't here. And it was a different concept and something that we looked at for opportunities when vehicles might not have been available for purchase. I think there have been some misunderstandings a bit with the policy, and according to the attorney, our purchase policy doesn't directly address leases, which I think it needs to. I think the intent of our purchasing policy is that one person in the organization, whoever they may be, does not have the power to enter the city into any type of a transaction that is above the purchase policy. We talked about back in February the fact that, in fact, my exact statement was, I'm not a fan of leasing. This master agreement is no promise to buy or lease anything, gives us the opportunity to look at leases, needs to come forward. You'll do an analysis of leasing versus purchasing. You'll bring information to us and have the final decision whether we lease or purchase. City manager affirmed by saying correct. So, as you can see in the memo, there are some differences of opinion, differences of steps, and I will go on record by saying I will never approve another lease here unless it is in the best interest of the taxpayers and the city. I don't think this is the best deal going forward. I did talk to a car dealer, and there are cars available, and they did order cars from Ford. And as Commissioner Bauer mentioned, $44,000 purchase 2021, given a little bit for inflation, and we're paying over $59,000 for each unit. We also went out of our norm, and we're buying 2 blue and 2 black. I don't know what the decision was there, probably availability. So I'm not pleased, but here we are. And if we don't approve this tonight, we'll be in default to whatever that company is, the Enterprise. I think that we, as a commission, need to put, and the administration need to put some better controls in place as far as defining leases and defining lease acquisitions of equipment. And that was suggested by the attorney. I would like to give a special thanks to Finance Director Kristen Collins and Deputy City Manager Robin Troyer. That's why we have quality department heads. That's why we have checks and balances within the system. So, and that's why we need to work together towards more creative options for this. So, just wanted to point those out. This is not a personal attack, but I'm not in favor of what has happened here. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments. Commissioner Miller.
So you said something about being in default to Enterprise, and what's that gonna cost us if we're in default?
Well, we'd have to pay the contracts out full, and then we'd have a lawsuit. So.
Thank you.
And we would destroy the city's credit rating. So, any other questions or comments? Commissioner Rubenstein? As I see it, we have no choice but to go forward and reaffirm the leases. So, anybody like to make that motion? Sure.
So with this lease after the 4 years, can we not be in this situation?
Correct.
Sure, Commissioner Bauer.
I will make the motion only because somebody has to.
Correct.
So I move that we reaffirm city commission action taken on December 19th of 2022, approving the city manager to execute 4 open-end lease rate quotes with Enterprise Fleet Management Incorporated for 2022 and 2023 Ford Police Interceptor utility vehicles with a term of 4 years and a total estimated cost of $237,555.
Support.
It has been moved and supported. Any other questions or comments? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Gary,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Bosvis Rath,
Yes.
Commissioner Abusta,
Yes.
Commissioner Marble,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
No.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passed. Moving on to G, business items number 2. Oh, I'm
There's
sorry.
another motion.
Sorry about that. Mr. Bauer.
So move that we direct city administration to draft amendments to the applicable city charter/ordinances and the purchasing policy to address personal property leases, clarify processes already in place, and communicate those processes to or with city staff.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Thank you. Motion passed. Now we'll go to G, business items number 2, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a request to purchase 6 flow meters and startup equipment from HESCO. These are the same pieces of sewer equipment that we brought to the commission a few meetings ago. They're manholes with smart meters on them. We did bid those out. We received one bid from HESCO for $35,100. We would look for a motion to approve the purchase as presented, as well as a motion to make a budget amendment for the sewer capital equipment fund in the amount of $35,100.
Thank you, City Manager. Any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Rubenstein, would you like to make that motion?
Motion to approve the purchase from HESCO in the amount of $35,100 for 6 flow meters and startup equipment.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Rubenstein, the second motion.
Motion to authorize a budget amendment for sewer capital equipment in the amount of $35,100 funded by the Sewer Capital Reserves Fund.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you very much. Moving on into item G, business items number 3. City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is a request to waive the bidding requirements for the fire department to work with Pierce Manufacturing to design and develop a replacement fire engine. Currently, E57, which is one of our pumper engines, was originally purchased in 1998. It has far exceeded its useful life. It's starting to really nitpick us on our budget in terms of operating and maintenance and repairs of some of the equipment on it. This particular request is to keep our trucks more standardized with the manufacturer that we've used in the past. Pierce Manufacturing is the ones that have built most of our vehicles, if not all of our vehicles. To kind of keep everything standardized and be able to have equipment move in and out from one truck to the other truck, we tend to look for the standardization of the trucks. So by approving this motion, this allows us to work directly with Pierce so we can figure out design, build, and cost while we also figure out the financing for the project. The estimated truck right now is about $800,000. There are some EPA changes regarding the diesel components that could increase that cost. But we won't know until we get some design and build estimates put in place. So we look for a motion to approve the bid, waiving the bid requirements for the fire truck to work with Pierce Manufacturing for the design and development of a replacement fire truck.
Thank you, City Manager. Any questions or comments? And again, this is a motion to waive bidding requirements, so it requires a unanimous vote of the commission if we go forward. Any questions or comments? I know that we've had, just a comment, I know we've had great luck with Pierce Manufacturing. We have great service from our repair facility. I certainly would like to see what other options are available out there, kind of in the same vein as the last item that we had with vehicles. I don't know if you have any information on what else is available, what costs they are, and what reliability they have?
I'm going to call up Fire Chief, and he can address that question.
Thank you. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. And that's a great question about what's available. And if we look at it realistically, there's 72 different manufacturers in the United States for fire apparatus. Not all are the same. And in my previous experience, I dealt with a fleet that was 4 times the size of ours. And we dealt with 5 different manufacturers. And in my experience, the ones that lasted were Pierce. The ones that were left our fleet prematurely, sometimes as soon as 7 years, were the other vendors. So the bidding process would show that there were other trucks available, but they wouldn't show apples to apples choices for what we're looking for and what would meet the needs of our operations currently. There are options, but it would delay the process so we can get some money figures down and move forward. And that's part of the problem too, is the EPA is coming out with a new requirement for diesel emissions. That is going to add probably $80,000 to a purchase just for the motor.
Regardless of the vendor.
Regardless of the measure. So regardless of the vendor, regardless of that, there's only two motors that are actually made for fire engines right now, and Cummins is one of them. And Pierce has the two options. So that gives us some flexibility. The other manufacturers only are able to use Cummins motors. So regardless of who we work with, we're going to have a big increase unless we move sooner and get the process along and secure one of the last EPA required, current EPA standard vehicle motors. It's sort of crazy because the fire service was left out of the whole EPA emissions thing, and it's quite costly. It's going to impact a lot of municipalities, and really the trend right now is everybody's scrambling to try to secure one of the current motors. Besides that, we said earlier, COVID. COVID has affected everything. Whatever you decide to do today, know that it's a 3-year build time for a fire truck. So we have a vehicle that's 25 years old, and I jokingly said the other day that it's older than some of our newest employees, would be eligible to retire. And now we're going to add a 3-year lifespan to that to try to keep it on the road to use for our citizens. The other thing that I look at is, why do we need another fire truck? Because our mission has changed. And these vehicles change. Safety equipment changes. And there are standards out there that show that we should be in a rotational period for removing fire trucks from our fleet, partially for liability, partially for the care and maintenance of them to keep them on the road, and partially because things have changed in the fire service. When this truck was built, it was built to carry water. It has 1,400 gallons of water because there were some areas that weren't protected with hydrants. We don't have that same need, so we don't have that same liability of carrying that weight. And we can use that space for the equipment that we have changed, such as for confined space rescue, water rescue, or rope rescue. So while we take really good care of our fire trucks, and they look like they can last forever, and we do take care of them, we have pride in them, eventually we have to replace them. So we're trying to save you the opportunity for the price increase. I'm a taxpayer too. I think it's a great value to try to save the money where we can. And working with a quality manufacturer, I think, is a great way to protect our assets with the city as well.
Any questions, comments? Just for transparency, nobody in the department is consulting for Pierce Manufacturing at this time?
Nobody in the department is consulting for Pierce.
Thank you.
Nobody works for Pierce.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Anybody like to make the motion?
A motion to waive the bidding requirements and allow the fire department to work directly with Pierce Manufacturing for the design and the development of a replacement fire engine.
Support.
It has been moved and supported. Can we do a roll call, please? Deputy City Manager.
Yep. Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Baspis Rath,
Yes.
Commissioner Habusta,
Yes.
Commissioner Marble,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
No.
Commissioner Rubenstein,
Yes.
Mayor Gary.
Yes. Motion fails. We will move on into G, business items number 4, City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next for commission consideration is adoption of the 23-29 capital improvement plan. This is our 6-year CIP that comes to the commission and gets fed into the budget document. In it is a number of projects that expand out throughout the organization for the next 6 years. First year 1 projects have been built into the project. Not everything has been funded, as funding is limited for certain areas. The process has gone through the Plan Commission and came to the commission with a recommendation for approval. Included in the document is an appendix that does reflect some of the citizens' comments and ideas for projects. These items were not included in the formal CIP, but more as an addendum, just to highlight if there's anything that the commission sees that stands out from these projects, we could research further in the future. So we look for a motion to approve the CIP as presented.
Thanks, City Manager. Good-looking plan, certainly long and lots of good pictures. Anybody have any questions or comments? Sure, Commissioner Habusta.
Yeah, just one comment, and I appreciate including the public input held at Planning Commission, and I wish there was a way we could score those on the same rating scale, and I know it seems there's not, but I think there'd be value if there's a way to figure out how to score some of that public input as well, to see where it lines up with the departmental input. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Any other comments? And certainly it's worth noting, and I think City Manager mentioned it, but just because it makes it into the CIP does not mean that it is a project that will get funded. That's up to the budgeting process annually too, so. Commissioner Marble, would you like to make the motion?
Motion to adopt the 2023 through 2029 capital improvement plan as presented.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The plan is approved. Thank you. Moving to item H, which is City Manager announcements and updates. City Manager, didn't know if you had any.
I got them on a post note. Just a reminder that Easter Day Avenue reconstruction and the car by dock will be starting here in the next couple of weeks. I believe Portage Avenue mill and overlay is going to be starting here in the next couple of weeks too, right?
Mill and overlay should have been this morning, so, on Ashland.
Yeah, yeah.
And, 129 will be in 2 weeks.
And M29 will be in 2 weeks, and 129, so.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of orange barrels going up pretty soon here, so please be patient as we reconfigure some of our roads.
I think the electronic side said a week from today, didn't it, on Ashman? 24th?
They mobilized out there this morning.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything
But the
starts
construction
mobilizing.
doesn't start till 24th?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Gotcha. Any questions for City Manager, or Engineer, or anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move on into item I, which is matters presented by the public. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments at this time? Seeing none? You can please state your name.
Listen, I'm the public now. You can't ignore me.
Be nice, huh?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. First of all, excuse me for my attire. I normally watch these meetings now in my pajamas, so I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I just wanted to kind of piggyback on a couple of comments that both the mayor made and then what Commissioner Bauer made. And I can tell you that almost sitting on it for a decade on that side of the building, that a lot of these ideas, I'm going back to form-based code, a lot of these ideas are not spurred out of malice. We all sit there because we love our community and we want to make the best decisions for our community, and we're also very passionate. And when we go to these training seminars, which are normally all around the state, we get excited because we see things that we would like to institute in our community that aren't currently happening. And so then that's when we're able to look at our department heads as the professionals and say to them, how can we bring this to Sault Ste. Marie and turn some of these things into Sault Ste. Marie ideas? And so that's really where form-based code started at, was just excitement in Traverse City and also excitement just recently in Muskegon. And it wasn't out of malice, it wasn't out of abuse of political power, because you know and I know that the decisions that you make here may mean that you won't be sitting there in 2 years or in 4 years. So you do want to make decisions that your constituents also are in favor of. But I think there's so much confusion over form-based code. It was not meant to overregulate. It was meant to ease. And at the time, we were also looking at making our community more business-friendly. Do you remember all of the problems that we had with business trying to come to town and work in all of the different departments? And we kept saying, if we could just put it in one folder and make it easier, won't people want to come and develop here a lot easier? And that's really where the conversations came from. It didn't come from a bad place. We're mostly in favor of it. And the reason that one of the reasons that we're in favor of it is we would like to develop again. And I know that one of the things that we need downtown are more residents. And we won't have more residents until form-based code passes. Because right now you have that parking requirement, right? And all of those old historical buildings, they don't have any parking attached to them. So they won't be able to be redeveloped to put residents upstairs. And I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying some of them. I should preface that. I didn't say all. But there's not a lot of space. We do have way too much parking. And we all know, Commissioner Talentino always said, we don't have a parking problem in this town, we have a walking problem in this town. And the fact that Ashman Street's gonna be closed for 2 months, and we own a store on Ashman, we're really worried because people complain to us all the time that there's no place to park and come to our store. Well, guess what? There's a huge parking lot right next door. We're gonna pay for their quarters. And we will pay for people to park there to come to our store. So these are meant to be positive comments, not negative comments. It was really brought out of like good, well intentions for our city and not out of anything bad. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Good to see you back in here. Anybody else have any comments? All right, moving on into item J, which is matters presented by the City Commission. Any commissioner that has any comments? Commissioner Miller.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess this is directed at you, Brian. A few meetings ago and a couple of meetings ago, we were talking about the Puller Stadium, and we identified a lot of problems and how expensive it is to fix things there, but I just wonder where are we at? Like, are we moving forward, or this is kind of their downtime now in the summertime, so, I mean, this would be the time to start getting things fixed.
So the ice has been off for a couple. Sorry. So the ice has been off for a couple weeks now. The staff has been doing a real deep clean on the Puller Stadium, repainting some of the structures inside of it. Director Perrin's got an RFP going out later this week. I believe he said last week, later this week, that will be for engineering services for the hood. I think we'll get a little bit more into it tomorrow during the budget. There are some projects that have been proposed to be funded for the some of the mechanical aspects of the plant. So there are some things that are moving along.
Thank you. I don't want to be a thorn in your shoe about it, but I'm going to talk about it every chance I get, because now is the time to fix things down there and get it going, because hockey season, I mean, and I know it's only April still, but it won't be long, a couple of months, hockey season will be starting up again. And I mean, you can't even go in the Puller Stadium and get an order of French fries right now. What other ice rink in the country you can't go and get at least get an order of French fries, you know? So.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. Any other commissioners? Seeing none, Commissioner Bauer.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Support.
Been moved and supported to adjourn this meeting. All in favor say aye.